Hello and welcome to another episode of Not Your Average Farm Shop, the podcast from the farm Stratford. Today I'm joined by Mike O'Hara, who is the co-founder and director of training at Start Within, which is an employee wellbeing training brand based in Alderminster. And for today's episode, we're going to be focusing on the power of community and how coming together can be really beneficial for mental health, because I think a lot of the time it can feel quite easy to be isolated and feel like you don't know where to go for support. So thank you for joining me today, Mike. It's great to have you. So just to start off with, can you tell us a little bit about Start Within, what the origins of that were, and how you've come to be where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me, first of all. I'm a big fan of the farm as a local and everything you do. And it's been great to be able to kind of work together and to appear on the podcast. So my name is Mike O'Hara, as you said, and my background is actually within the armed forces. So I spent just over 12 years within the Royal Air Force, where I worked in intelligence, which the first thing I always say on that is if it sounds like I was a spy, I wasn't. It was an office job like anything else, although I did get to do some interesting stuff. But I have my own sort of lived experience of challenges with my mental health, as lots of people will. I'm sure lots of your listeners will resonate with that. And I was able to kind of take that lived experience. I was very lucky in getting support at the time. A big part of that was a sense of community and connection, as we'll go on to talk about. And with that, sort of blend it with my experience in training, which I was lucky enough to do a lot of within the Air Force, and bring together those two kind of strands to found Start Within, which, as you said, is a mental health and wellbeing kind of training organisation, a lot of workplace wellbeing, but lots of community work as well. And with my wife, Abby, we were able to found Start Within as our own little company to basically deliver our brand of mental health and wellbeing training. And the one thing that we're really passionate about is that this should feel accessible and very relatable, and it can feel upbeat and it can feel colourful, and you can have a sense of humour with stuff. I think that what we saw was there was some great training and speaking and engagement out there, but a lot of the time it potentially felt quite one size fits all, quite generic, or at times it could feel quite cold and clinical. Now there's clearly a space for that, but actually at the same time, if we accept that everybody has a sense of mental health, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's anywhere in between, that we should all feel equipped to talk about it, and it should feel relatable and accessible to the individual as well. So what we've tried to do with Start Within is really base everything we do around that founding belief of normalising conversations about mental health. I'm very, very lucky in that founding this little project, I had a live-in kind of social media expert and marketing genius and design a design expert as well in my wife Abby, who pretty much did all of the hard stuff, all of the stuff that's enabled us to get going and to flourish in the way we have. My expertise is just very much in the training delivery and talking about this stuff, so I have to give a lot of credit to her as well.
I was going to say that it's very evident in your social media, like all that upbeat philosophy, like it's very colourful. Like if you go on your Instagram page, then people will see instantly that it feels very warm and inviting. So I think you've achieved that there.
Brilliant.
You mentioned that you used to be part of the Royal Air Force. How did you, sort of talking a little bit about community, did you find that you felt united as part of something in that, or did the feeling of community, or perhaps lack of it, help or hinder your well-being?
And I think the Air Force and the military by extension, a big part of the plus points that I experienced were that sense of camaraderie, a sense of a shared identity. I think a lot of people find their tribe, if you like, within the Air Force or whichever of the services they join within the military. I think, you're all there in the same uniform, regardless of your background or your gender or where you come from. You're all there with a shared identity. It's a very level playing field, and I think that's a really good thing. I think that feeling part of something bigger is absolutely crucial to us as human beings. Right back into our kind of evolution, we are pack animals. We have soared as a species through our ability to come together as groups of people and to share thoughts and experiences and to hand down stories and to believe in shared goals. And I think the Air Force was very much kind of built on that as well. You did have a feeling that you're all pulling in the same direction. You felt like you were of service as well, which I think is a big part of community, of giving something back. And I just made great friends as well. Other people of a similar persuasion, people from very different backgrounds, but you come together from all over the country, you work together, often in quite pressurised and difficult scenarios, but again, through that adversity, you find that you pull together and form a kind of close-knit bond as well. So I had a mixed experience within the military. Some things I really loved, some things I'm quite glad to leave behind, as with any job, really, but I would definitely pinpoint the sense of community as definitely one of the plus points.
In a more general sense, why is it that community is so important for people's mental well-being?
I think it's always been a huge part of us as human beings, whether we obviously realise it every day or not. I made that point about the way we've evolved. It has been as groups of people. You think about every leap forward that's ever been made in human evolution, whether it's industrial revolution or cultural revolutions, advances made in tech or science or kind of agriculture. We're on a farm right now. All of this has been done as groups of people working together, communicating, sharing stories. We think about faith and religion and spirituality. All of this stuff is coming together around a shared experience and feeling part of something bigger. And I think that's something a lot of us gear our life around without noticing sometimes. Your sense of community could be your family, it could be your friends, it could be your job community, it could be your football team, it could be music, it could be the arts. Feeling connected and part of something bigger, I've found personally, has been intrinsic to my mental health and well-being. To share a sort of brief example, when I did encounter my own challenges, I'd had a bad knee injury playing football within the Air Force. Lucky enough to get really, really good medical care and support and rehab and physio. It was brilliant. I can't speak highly enough of that. But during that recovery, a big part of it was me resting at home, kind of on the sofa for 4 months, leg in a brace, a bit like a lockdown before we had them. And my mental health really deteriorated. It kind of fell off the edge of a cliff, to be honest. And the one thing that I probably didn't realise at the start, but I came very much to realise, was what I was missing was feeling part of something bigger. At the time, me and my wife we were living in Warwickshire, as we do again now, but my wife was out working in Birmingham at the time. I was at home on my own. Because of the Air Force, I've moved around a lot, so I wasn't immediately on the doorstep of a kind of support network. I wasn't giving myself to the work because I was off sick. I didn't feel like I had that purpose. I didn't feel like I was part of something. And that isolation, which I know will be very familiar to a lot of people, particularly over the last few years with the pandemic, certainly, it really took a toll on my mental health. Now, I was getting fantastic care for my physical injury. I had access to support with regards to my mental health, talking with therapists, with medication. I've got fantastic family around me, brilliant friends, all of that stuff. But when you're physically isolated, and let's face it, other people have their own lives that they're getting on with, if you find yourself kind of cut off from that sense of community, feeling part of something bigger, then I think it really strips something away from you as a human being. There's some really interesting studies you can look at of, if take a baby that's born, and if it's immediately kind of taken away from its mother, even if it's given everything it needs to sustain itself from a kind of physiological perspective, you still see stunted development in that baby because there's something intrinsic to feeling part of that kind of family unit, something that the mother gives it, something deep and, that deep connecting bond that's there. And it's kind of bred into us as human beings. You see it in nature. I'm sure we see it on the animals here in the farm. There's that unspoken connection that you have with someone as part of something bigger. So I can get quite evangelical about this, you can probably tell, but it's because I was someone who'd never really had cause to think about my mental health before until something happened, until there was the absence of that community. And then I realised how impactful it was. I remember the first day I could crutch up to the coffee shop up the road from where we were living. And I just kind of sat there and I could hear people talking, having normal conversations. I had a bit of a back and forth with the barista who was serving the coffee. And I just felt this sense of, I'm back amongst people again. There's a shared experience. The shared experience was we've all come there to get our morning coffee. That's all it was. But it really struck a chord with me. And then onwardly, that's why I've always been keen to volunteer, to give something back to communities, often from a selfish perspective, actually, because I know if I don't feel part of something bigger, something that's pulling in the right direction, that actually affects my mental health. So actually I see a lot of selflessness in my life from a very selfish motivation, if that makes sense. But a very long and rambling answer to your question, but I'm really into this stuff, as hopefully you can tell.
No, I think you're so right about that, because I think a lot of the time there's a lot of focus on things like sleep and nutrition and other areas of health that come before connecting with people, because I think it can seem a little bit wishy-washy sometimes, but actually it is really, really important. And you mentioned there a little bit, you almost only realise how important it is when you lose it. So I was going to ask you a little bit about that and how the absence of it, how that can affect people, how it can sort of lead to negative mental health spirals. And, you know, even as you were saying, when you were injured, you couldn't move. So it's a combination of a lot of factors, really, isn't it? Not getting the exercise and seeing people. So is there any more that you wanted to say on that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you rightly mentioned there are those kind of foundations on which we build our mental health, and we think about sleep, exercise, diet, even professional supports, therapies, medications, all these kind of things, which are very, very, very important. And you've had some fantastic other people talk to you about this already, I know. Something that I feel underpins a lot of that is that sense of community and connection, in that without that, it can really strip your enthusiasm for those things. I think feeling a little bit lost and a little bit cut off and isolated, it can really knock your motivation to look after yourself. The other thing I think is that what community often gives us as well is a sense of perspective. So when you're around other people, you get that back and forth, you get that perspective and context perhaps for worries you might have, you get that opportunity to vent the way you've been feeling, to communicate it with someone else. Also, it can give you a sense of perspective. I talked about the volunteering side of things. We saw that in perfect relief in the pandemic, the first kind of lockdowns, when all of a sudden people got to know their neighbours and their local communities, and they were helping perhaps someone who was vulnerable with their shopping. And I'm sure that the person really appreciated that, but people were getting a real boost out of that as well. Look at the way we rallied around the NHS as well. We suddenly realised how important these things are, these community initiatives, these services that we rely so much upon. And I think it gives you a sense of perspective. It also gives you a sense of purpose. It boosts your own self-esteem because you feel like you're giving something to someone else. And I think it's hard to rival the feeling you get, feeling like you've contributed to something and felt part of something bigger. Any achievement you have, you hear people talk about this in sport all the time. The unbridled joy you see when someone lifts a trophy at the end of the season is because they've got there as a team, isn't it? Not to say individual achievements aren't important and don't carry their own sense of joy and excitement, but coming, I think, with adversity, approaching adversity and overcoming challenges as a collective feels great, and actually it's a lot easier if you've got people there on your side. And equally, feeling successful, feeling like you're all working towards a shared goal is really, really important. I think that sense of connection is something that as well is more easily lost potentially in the way we now live. We live in smaller family units, we live vicariously through social media. The pandemic has obviously disconnected a lot of us, and that's why, I'm not just saying this, things like the farm for local communities are fantastic, because it brings people together, first of all, physically, but also around something that we all understand to be good, which is connection with nature, supporting local people, supporting local produce, having loads of cake and coffee.
Yeah,
what could be better?
Absolutely. That was the next thing I was going to come on to, actually, like from a slightly different angle, looking at it from a business perspective and like working as a team, coming together like as a collective here, but also, as you mentioned, the community aspects of being a farm and holding that space. And I think also working with local suppliers and small businesses. So there's a few we've got just next door. We've got the Welcome Hills vineyard, which are obviously, you couldn't get much closer than that. And then the Purity Brewing, that's 7 miles away, I think. Yeah. And then little shops in town, like there's Cookie Cottage, which supply us here. I think it's all like building each other up, which really helps. And it's not just the food sort of side of things as well, but also working with people like you guys, Start Within, and other organisations that provide, wellbeing workshops and things like that really, really helps. So is there anything that you, as Start Within, tend to look for when you're collaborating with other people in the community? Is there anything, maybe from a community point of view or otherwise, that is really important to you guys?
I think the first thing would be to understand the challenges that people face, and that goes back to that thing around not being kind of one size fits all in your approach to this stuff. It would be very easy for me to just take our kind of stock training around to whatever client or whatever community group that might be, or whoever it is, and just rattle off the same old stuff. And some of it may well be useful, but I think what we've felt really successful with and that we love doing is taking the time to understand the people around us and the people that we're supporting, the people we're bringing together in a space. So the Wellness Wednesday workshop that we ran previously on stress, we started that by sitting everyone down and kind of asking everyone what's brought you here today, what are the kind of contemporary stresses for you that you're happy to share, what are the elements of this that you find difficult. And actually there's really nuanced little things within that, and very of the moment stressors. There might be things that actually are rooted in, you know, the locality of where those people are, and you can't even begin to help someone if you don't fully understand what is affecting that kind of community. The thing I'm really proud of at Start Within is the variety we have. So we will, you know, I go into prisons and talk to guys there who are living through that experience, and they actually have a sense of connection and community with one another. Then I'll deal with a corporate client who has very different challenges, but again, they're trying to foster a sense of connection and collaboration and community. And then you have local initiatives, things like you do at the farm here, where it's bringing people together who I'm sure all have very different backgrounds and lenses on things, but you're bringing them together around it, you know, in a central space, again, around something that you know to be good. And I think getting to the heart of what really challenges people, facilitating that conversation without any fear of judgment or being dismissed, or even any expectation of a concrete solution. A lot of the time, the beauty of our sessions is people helping each other as well. So actually, you've got people young and old. Last time we did the Wellness Wednesday workshop here, I think we had someone who was 19 and we had someone who was in their 80s. Where else are you going to get that opportunity to bring people together with the local community in common to talk about stress and to actually give each other some advice and some tips and their perspective on things? So making it very personable, making it feel relatable is what I think is very important. Seeing a community for what they're interested in, where their challenges lay, I think that's the key, and that's why I love it. And also, there's just something nice about bringing local people together, and I think that goes right back through our history. I think it's something we probably used to do a lot more. I think about my upbringing. I come from a tiny little village in rural Essex where, you know, there's about 3 families that monopolise that village in a good way, but they would help each other out and they would share their resources, and there's something lovely about that. And I think cultivating that, it brings you that kind of warm fuzzy feeling that's probably always been there for human beings, but we don't always nurture it the way we could.
We're quite lucky here, I think, because you mentioned how you work with a variety of people, like the corporate and the prisons and things like that, because we've got the upstairs meeting room, which is quite good for, you know, more corporate get-togethers, and then also the private dining room, and the polytunnel where we are recording today, which is a bit of a different location. We're normally upstairs, but yeah, we've branched out here and sometimes have things like yoga in here, so all really good for bringing the community together. But on a more personal level for you, I know that a few months ago you and your partner Abby welcomed a little girl.
Yes.
So how, if you don't mind sort of answering, have you found that communities helped you in that sense, like maybe the sharing of resources, knowledge, groups, that how have you found that to be really essential in this time?
Well, I don't want to speak for Abby, but I can certainly say that her recognising, and me as well, but most I would say recognising that it can be an isolating experience to have a child, particularly we come from opposite sides of the country. We've kind of settled in lovely leafy Warwickshire where we love it. The one thing we're probably lacking is that immediate support network. We've got fantastic sets of parents, but they both live a bit of a journey away. So my experience has been reaching out into this local community. You don't realise actually how much there is to support people in the position we've been in having a newborn baby. I never see Abby anymore because she's constantly out having coffee and cake. She comes to the farm most weeks. Stratford has a variety of different clubs and activities, and what you see in really, you know, it's very, very clear and obvious is the way in which parents support each other as well. Because again, what you're doing is you're coming together around a like-minded experience. I'm a massive, massive advocate for peer support as a method of treating mental health challenges. Not only because I think that immediate professional support isn't always there ready to go. We know things like GP wait times. We know that not everyone gets on with medication, not everyone wants to have therapy. And I've seen it firsthand as well. I used to volunteer for a peer support group when I volunteered with Mind, the National Mental Health Charity. I would see how powerful it is, and again, it comes back to that innate human need for community and connection, coming together with like-minded people. In that instance, it was people with a shared experience of mental health challenges, often quite severe and life-limiting. And that might be the only time they would get out of the house that week. And coming together for that hour and playing a few board games and having a cup of tea was the highlight, because it was that human connection. Now, if I translate that across to what I've seen as a new parent, and particularly in what is such a welcoming and lovely setting where we live, we're so lucky to have that, but I'm sure this is replicated up and down the country, is people realising that having a baby can be tough. And I say particularly for Abby, she's a very driven, a very talented, but a very kind of ambitious person, and then having a lot of that kind of workplace stuff stripped away, I think it's been very important for her, and me by extension, in supporting that, to still have that sense of purpose, to have that thing planned in each day, and all of that has been centred around a sense of community with other parents who've experienced the same challenges. And it comes back to that perspective thing again. If your baby's up in the middle of the night screaming its head off, it really helps to be able to text a friend who you've met at your NCT class, or at a coffee and cake morning, or baby massage, or baby sensory, or baby whatever it might be, and say, look, is yours doing this too? Should I worry? How are you getting on? I think that's been arguably the most valuable thing that we've had at our disposal, and touch wood, means that it's all going quite well as well.
I think there is so much value in that, isn't there? Like, just to know that you're not going crazy, and that it's just all part of a very natural experience. I think also what you said there about finding like-minded people, I think that can be a little bit of a barrier sometimes until you found them. Like, I think with going away, moving to a new city, like maybe growing up through school and not quite feeling like you found your people, and then obviously there was the pandemic, which made everything a lot harder, and also with social media, like a lot of the way we interact has shifted to online. So do you feel that has helped build communities, or do you think it's got in the way of those natural connections? It's
a really good question, and it's something I'm very, very interested in, is the kind of social media dynamic. I've talked a lot there about the power of traditional community and coming together with our little pockets wherever we are, and it may sound like I'm harking back. I actually think that it's very easy to vilify social media and see it as, well, it is a very polarising place to spend our time. It can be a really isolating place if you are potentially only living vicariously through other people's lives. You're obviously only getting a snapshot of other people's experience. That can feel quite isolating if you don't feel like you're living up to the expectations of society, or maybe even expectations you put on yourself. I would balance that though by saying that social media also has given a lot of people an opportunity to find a voice. So actually you might be feel quite marginalised where you physically live, but actually online you may be able to find your tribe there and find other people, maybe worldwide, who share that particular characteristic, viewpoint, interest, struggle, whatever that might be. So I think it does give people an opportunity to connect in a way that we haven't before, and I think that's the really good thing about social media, and I'd like to think that's what it was designed to do. Obviously we could talk for probably hours and hours about all the cons as well as the pros of social media and living online. I think it plays a massive part in our mental health, both positive and negative, and there are nuances within that, but preferring to focus on the positive here. I think that finding your tribe, I keep using that phrase, but it's one that I think is so true, finding that sense of community, feeling like you can contribute and have a voice and be seen and feel heard and feel valued. Again, that comes back to everything we've been talking about. Probably finding a balance, I think, between that side of things and kind of physical connection in terms of being in the room with someone. Something I would want to caveat, actually, based on everything I've said, is that someone might listen to this and think, well, I'm a bit of an introvert, or I don't have loads of friends, so how can I get that sense of community and connection? It's not about necessarily having to be surrounded by people all of the time. On the flip side, loneliness, you can be surrounded by people all of the time and still feel lonely. It's a state of mind, often, or an emotional state. It's about feeling like you have the opportunity and the choice and the agency to connect with people, whether that's virtually, whether that's physically, or have a sense of connection or community with something. I'm sure a lot of people find their sense of community with nature and animals, or with sport, or with music. So it's not about saying you have to have 10,000 Instagram followers or thousands of Facebook friends, or to be out and about every night surrounded by people. It's about finding that feeling of being part of something bigger. I think that's it. And lots of people find that through things like spirituality and faith. Lots of people find it through volunteering. People find it through their work. It's just finding what helps you to feel more whole, I think.
I think the point you made about introverts and extroverts is a really good one as well, because people get their energy from different places, and that's fine. But it's almost just knowing that there are other people out there like you, and there is the option to connect if you want to. But I, a few months ago, had a conversation which was quite interesting. It was just as we were trying to relaunch these Wellness Wednesdays, with someone about the word community and how it can sometimes feel a bit, I don't know how you describe it, but maybe it puts people off, and they maybe think, oh, I'm not really sure that group activities or a community centre or a community hub are right for me. Like, what are your thoughts on that, on the language that we put around this kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it's a really good observation, really interesting. I don't know that I would have a definite kind of answer in terms of this is exactly what it should mean. I think you're entirely right in that it can feel like a loaded term. A community group, immediately that may send kind of shivers down someone's spine at the thought of attending a group with people I don't know, and particularly if someone is quite reserved about perhaps seeking help and they hear something like community group. So I think it's about opening it out to think about, well, what is community at its essence? It is a sense of pulling in the same direction a lot of the time, of helping one another, of potentially being willing to share resources or teachings or support. Community, we find it, as I say, within our families. It doesn't have to be, going along to a community centre. So I think it's about thinking about it as an idea rather than a physical location that you have in your head. And I think that it's empathy as well. I think empathy runs as a thread through all of this conversation and pretty much everything I find myself talking about every day with regards to our mental health and well-being, particularly how we support each other. I think a big part of community is having people who can have empathy with one another's situation, a willingness to understand, not an overwhelming desire to change someone or to fix someone's problems, being willing and open to learning about the challenges they're having, being a listening ear. I think that's a big part of community as well. The benefit I've drawn from it isn't necessarily from a specific community activity. It's more of an emotional feeling, in terms of there's something different that I feel when I'm in those situations where I'm part of something bigger. And I think I even said this when I walked out of the Wellness Wednesday workshop we did last time with you. I said there is something different I get from coming together in a situation where there's no ulterior motive. It is purely, here's a subject, an issue, something that unites us, and let's talk about it, let's share, let's have empathy with one another. Perhaps let's try and lift that person up who might be struggling. If we're a little further along the road, what have we learned from it? And then parting ways, what can we all do to continue to support one another, stay in touch, whatever it might be. That's community perfectly realised, I think. But I understand how it can feel a loaded term. It's about opening that out and having a bit more perspective, I think.
Yeah, I think in terms of the physical spaces, then like you mentioned that last session that you did, you definitely just felt something after that, and you're running another one today actually all about financial well-being, which I think especially at this time is going to be really, really valuable for people. And in the farm as a whole, I'd say that the real community feeling definitely comes from the cafe. Like, it comes from, that's where like the energy is, I think, and like where people can come and connect, like you said with Abby, like over coffee and cake. And it's really nice on a busy weekend to feel that real buzz in there. And Charlie speaks about that a little bit in the first episode of this podcast. She sort of says how that came from like her dissertation, and everything that the farm is today is built around that. But where would you say is the space for you? You mentioned that it doesn't have to be somewhere physical. You can kind of find it within, in your family, at home, maybe somewhere else. Like, where do you think that you get that community, or does it come from a range of different places?
I think that I used to be really into my sport. I still am. I used to be more of a player, but as I'm on the football pitch, and I've mentioned that those days are probably behind me with my knee now, sadly. Not that I was any great shakes, but actually, again, there's something in that team sports, coming together around a shared goal. It doesn't matter who you are, what your background, you're coming together around the kind of shared goal of putting a few past the other team. So I really took that from it. I think even attending sporting events now, there's something in the atmosphere of, everyone singing in unison, everyone behind that team, and there is an energy you feel in terms of willing the ball into the goal for your particular team. So I think sport does that for people. I think the other sense of community I get is very much in the work we do. We've talked a lot about it, but this is really a labour of love for us, start within, and we've been very lucky that we can now, support ourselves with it. But it is in terms of some days when perhaps, you are staying up late, messing around with your PowerPoint presentation, or making sure that your spreadsheet's up to date, or checking back in with emails. You can sort of start to think you've lost that spark. But then actually, when you sit down with someone, whether it's online, whether it is in person, and you hear perhaps some raw emotion come forth, or you facilitate an atmosphere where people feel comfortable to talk about things that perhaps they've been holding on to, or maybe you find a turn of phrase in the way that you're delivering the training that seems to connect with people, and you feel seen and you feel heard and valued, and people are looking to you. I get a sense of, that's probably my own self-esteem boost that I need, perhaps in my own ego, but I think I get a sense of community around the shared passion for mental health as a subject, as well as something that has historically been very stigmatised, particularly as a man talking about it. I know that carries a lot of additional stigma. So in the environments where I've been able to have those conversations with other blokes about this stuff, I definitely get a lot of energy from that, and a sense of community, as well as I'm sure a lot of people will experience, at home with the family, and I've got 2 dogs, so baby's asleep, happy, wife's happy, dogs are asleep, happy, I'm at peace. That's my little communal space as well.
Happy days.
Yeah.
We'll finish off with a few quick fire questions, a little bit more light-hearted. I try and ask these to all of the guests we get on.
Okay.
So sort of shared community through the podcast airwaves.
What's that word again? Community.
Community, yes, love it. What is your favourite thing about the farm? That's a bit of a self-indulgent one.
No, there's a lot to choose from. It's got to be. Has anyone else said the pigs?
I don't know, actually.
I feel like that's the obvious one, but maybe that's just because I love pigs so much. When I was growing up as a little kid, my favourite animal was a pig. I used to have a little toy pig. Don't know why, but when I saw them, I was straight over. So it's got to be the pigs.
I was stood watching them this morning for a while. They are really cute. When they were tiny, they look a lot like the little cuddly toy pigs that we've got in the shop, which, just unbelievably cute. What would be one song that you would add to our Feel Good playlist? Bit of an on-the-spot question, I know.
Yeah, that is. Feel Good. I would add... You'd think there's millions and millions and millions of songs in the world, and what would I add? Have we had Here Comes the Sun?
No, I think you're
I'll
good
go
with
with
that.
Here Comes the Sun. That's when you say feel good, I think of the sun in the sky, and then I go to Here Comes the Sun. So I'll go with that.
That's a lovely one. What is one thing that you do every day to live well? Maybe just part of your daily ritual or routine, something that lifts you up and makes you feel good.
That's an easy one. Walk the dogs. I've got 2 greyhounds, Harry and Pat. I'll give them a shout out. For any other greyhound owners, you will know how much joy they give you. They're 2 big horses of dogs, but they are so docile, so well behaved, and we're very lucky. We live out in the countryside. I walk them at least once a day, and that's just my time to reflect, to get some exercise, to get out in nature.
Finally, if people are looking for a bit of a lifeline, need some support, or are looking for some like-minded people, are there any organisations or places that you can recommend for them to go?
Yeah, absolutely. So Mind, the National Mental Health Charity, they are a fantastic national charity, but they also have local networks. So we have things like Springfield Mind locally to here. Wherever you live, though, there will be a Mind network. They run fantastic peer support groups around a variety of different kind of experiences. So your experience may be with a particular mental health issue, it could be with addiction, it could be with anxiety, it could be around financial wellbeing, and also the Mind website is a fantastic resource as a central hub for lots of information. Another top tip that I would give anyone is to download the Hub of Hope app. So that's Hub of Hope. I'm not on commission to share that. I wish I was, because I tell everyone about it. It's a free app though that you can download, and it basically works geographically. So it takes your location, where you are, wherever it might be in the country, and it gives you all the mental health support services around you with their contact details. So it's a bit like an Uber or a Just Eat, but for mental health support services. You don't get a takeaway at the end. But it's a really good kind of localised form of support if you are feeling overwhelmed, and you can reach out. So that would be my top tip.
Amazing. Something a bit more nourishing than a takeaway as well. I like the idea of that.
Yeah.
It's been great to talk to you. I think we'll hopefully look to run some more sessions with Start Within here. But if people want to look for you guys, find out more about your work, follow you on social media, where can they go?
Yeah, so before I share that, I want to say thank you for having me, and also want to say how good a podcast host you are as well, Lily, because I'm aware you ask all the questions, and you're very nice about your guests, but I've listened to this, all the episodes you've done so far, and I think you're a natural, so I did just want to say that as well. If anyone does want to follow us on social media, you can check out our Instagram. It's at StartWithinUK. We're on LinkedIn and Facebook as well, but everything we do is on Instagram. That's where I push everyone towards. So it's at StartWithinUK. Always happy for anyone to reach out. We'll help however we can, whether it's just listening, signposting, answering questions, sharing resources. Please do get in touch.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Brilliant, thank you.
If you'd like to keep up to date with everything going on at the farm, you can give us a follow on Instagram at the Farm Stratford. If you'd like to send us a voice note, you can do so by emailing hello@thefarmstratford.co.uk. Not Your Average Farm Shop is brought to you by the Farm Stratford.